We have been learning that the purpose of an ESL class is twofold. First, to help ELLs communicate through BICS and CALP, and second, to help ELLs achieve academically using their CALP, using their learning strategies, and knowing the content. So, to review, what are the three objectives every ESL class should contain that we have talked about? Well, we need to cover content, we need to cover a language skill, reading, writing, speaking, listening, grammar, pronunciation, a language point, focus on grammar or pronunciation, or a language function. And we need to teach students how to learn. This is learning strategy instruction. So, exactly what content should we teach? What language skills and functions should we teach? What learning strategies should we teach? How do we know what to teach? School districts, departments of education, and professional research organizations decide. They publish standards documents that spell out what students should know and what students should be able to do. What is performance-based learning, otherwise known as outcome-based learning? At the 1989 Education Summit in Charlottesville, Virginia, President George H.W. Bush, that's the first President Bush, and the nation's 50 governors proposed a long-term national education strategy, often referred to as Goals 2000. The call went out for national professional organizations to articulate clear, high standards for what students should know. These are called content standards, and how well they should know it. These are called performance standards. Then the states were supposed to establish delivery standards, declaring what all schools must provide in order for students to achieve the other two standards. All students were henceforth to be measured at intervals, say 4th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade. These standards and assessments together constituted a voluntary accountability system. This emphasis on standards led to the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002. Performance-based learning requires us to 1. Describe what students are expected to accomplish or perform. 2. Detail what kind of evidence will substantiate this performance. And 3. Design learning activities that will accumulate the desired evidence. If you're wondering what the professional organizations that were involved are, this is a list of them. You can see that there was one representing each of the 4 core subject areas. So the national process for doing all of this looks like this. National professional organizations and the United States Department of Education established goals. State departments of education and school boards planned a curriculum. Classroom teachers were in charge of planning the instruction, in other words, the unit themes or text chapters, and they planned daily lessons and activities which contain essential content area objectives. In Florida, performance-based learning looks like this. Content standards and performance standards are skills and competencies that are outlined in the Florida Sunshine State Standards, which were written in 1996. And they're also embedded in the material of the students' core classes. Now, the Florida Sunshine State Standards, or FLSSS, are called Next Generation Sunshine State Standards, or NGSSS. A classroom teacher in Florida plans instruction using these Sunshine State Standards at the specific grade level. Our measurement tool is the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test, or the FCAT, which originated in 1998. FCAT was administered to students in grades 3 to 11. It consisted of criterion reference tests in math, reading, science, and writing. and it measured how well students achieved the Sunshine State Standards benchmarks. During the 2010-2011 school year, Florida began the transition from the FCAT to the FCAT 2.0 and Florida end-of-course assessments. In Florida, our delivery standards are requirements of FCAT scores for passing to the next grade level, and they are set by school districts throughout Florida as stated in each district's student progression plan as permitted in Florida Statute 1008.22, Section 3, Part C. For more information about the history of the Florida Sunshine State Standards, you can view this other PowerPoint PDF file written by Dr. Sherry Pearson Yeke, who is the Chancellor of K-12 Public Schools. Florida was forced to figure out how to teach ESL in 1990 because of the Florida Consent Decree. Of course, it takes a long time to figure out just what to do and then to implement it. After all, the Consent Decree outlined 6 large complaints that had to be addressed. Florida figured out a definition of ELL and how to identify those kinds of students, and then Florida defined how we teachers have to be trained. They continue to work on creating specialized ESL standards, which are the English Language Proficiency Standards, the ELPS, that have to be aligned to all content areas. The ELPS were developed by getting recommendations from national TESOL professional organizations, taking those recommendations and writing specialized standards. This was done by the State Department of Education, and giving these specialized standards to classroom teachers. Classroom teachers would know what they are and what to do with them because they learned about them in the 5 TESOL courses required by the Florida Consent Decree. 3 different professional TESOL organizations developed ESL standards for the performance-based learning model. Each of these organizations worked separately, and each of their 5 recommendations is quite different from the others with a little overlap. So it is important to look at all 3 organizations' recommendations. There's a total of 15. The reason their recommendations differ is because each professional organization focuses on a different aspect or problem in the field of ESL. One of the organizations to respond to the first President Bush's and state governor's call for professional standards is Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Languages Incorporated, TESOL Inc. TESOL Inc.'s strength is its intense sole focus on ESL and providing lots of practical advice to teachers of ESL. The second professional organization you need to know about is the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, or ACTFL. Unlike TESOL Inc., ACTFL doesn't focus only on ELLs. It focuses on all students who learn any foreign language. For example, it was interested in shaping the Spanish program at the high school you attended. ACTFL's strength is assessing, evaluating, and testing. The last national professional organization is called the Center for Research on Education, Diversity, and Excellence, or CREED. Like ACTFL, CREED doesn't focus on just ELLs. CREED is interested in finding out what makes a great classroom for all at-risk students, including ELLs, but not exclusive to them. In the 5 TESOL courses you take, it's important to remember that you will not only be considering the Sunshine State Standards when you do the Using Sunshine State Standards assignment and when you write ESL lesson plans for critical assignments. You are also required to consider and use the English Language Proficiency Standards. Together, these 2 lists of standards are what defines performance-based learning, specifically in Florida.